Hello and welcome to Intuitive Conversations. I'm Chantelle Neufeld.
I'm Tamara Franz.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are doing a little anxiety experiment because just before we started recording, we were talking about the different ways that we experience anxiety. And for me, this is kind of a new realization that I actually do suffer from anxiety. And we talked a little bit about the ways that we try to control our environments, control our lives, deal with anxiety. And we thought, what if we just go on without too much preparation and without a timeline and just let ourselves be present and talk about anxiety? And so this is a little bit of an experiment, and we're hoping that some of you out there can relate to some of the things we talk about.
Yes. First of all, Tamara and I are quite human. We are superhuman. We experience anxiety. Even though we didn't label it as such and maybe thought that I don't know. I didn't think that it was a problem for me until my partner said, I don't know anyone who is as anxious as you are. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's just because I tell you everything I'm thinking. Um, but
Yeah.
I've noticed too, like especially with everything going on in the news and everyone being an empath, feeling everyone else's anxieties. I'm not immune to
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah. And I think as we go through this COVID time, it sort of brings to awareness a lot of things that, I think of that metaphor of the frogs in the pot of water, that
Mm,
the frogs being boiled in the pot, but they're in there when the water is cool and the water gets set on the stove. And then as the temperature is turned up, it gradually gets warmer and warmer and warmer. And there's never a point where they realize this is too hot, we should jump out. They just
mm,
kind of adjust and adjust and adjust to the temperature until it's too late and they
mm-hmm.
get boiled. And I feel like, for a lot of us, we explain things away. For me, it's being in my head and thinking things away. My strategic brain gets triggered and I go into problem solving mode without actually taking into account this and being able to name this is anxiety. So I grew up with one parent who was very stoic and probably very mentally oriented and probably wasn't aware of feelings, and another parent who is a very feeling person but very much focused on others and um, being an empath and connecting with others. And so I feel like I kind of inherited from both sides.
Same with
And
me.
yeah, and lacked the awareness of just being able to name for myself and to really feel. So I'm kind of on a mission now to learn how to get into my body and actually be aware and being able to name the anxiety when it arises and just be
Yeah,
present with it.
like checking in, what do you need, that sort of a thing. Um, for me, learning about the whole idea of being dysregulated, like that it's a body thing. That was huge for me because it, I don't know, it helped me to kind of figure out what to do. Like when I am feeling regulated, that I sort of have a bit of a plan of what to do first, second, third when I am feeling dysregulated. Because when you're feeling quite dysregulated, you can't think very clearly, or a lot of people can't think very clearly. And so, yeah, just very helpful for me to have a plan. Um, uh, my mind is opening 100 tabs again. That's okay.
For me, the journey is kind of about learning how to re-feel my emotions. Um, there's a guy named Raphael Kushner that has done some really good work, and he actually has a little free 4-part series that you can take on the hidden power of emotions online. Um, and for me, it's all about relearning how to actually feel a feeling. I
Mm,
love the idea of when you use the word emotion, thinking of it as energy in motion. And so, anytime, any kind of a feeling, any kind of emotion is energy, which if you don't release it, it stays in the body. And we all know that the body keeps track of everything. And I think as an adult, I always thought that I was processing emotions because I would think things through. right? And I would think, oh, where's this coming from? Or why did I say that? Why did they say this? Why am I feeling this? And trying to just puzzle it through and solve it in my mind. That is not a way of letting the energy move. And so learning how to just get out of the mind and into the body and say, what is actually going on in my body right now? And can I be with it? And, we always use the metaphor of water with emotions and letting them flow. And one of the great practices that this Raphael Kushner suggests is the idea of surfing emotions. And when you're feeling something, to just go into the body and say, where am I feeling this? And then be with it, and just like as if it was a wave, just surfing it as it moves, and it might move to another part of the body, or it might just move through you, and having that presence. Because when you're in your mind, you're actually not present.
Reminds me of labor. And you get those waves, those labor pains, and yeah, just thinking back to being in labor or seeing other women in labor, it is like they're sort of in a trance, in a bit of a hypnosis where, and
Yeah,
I mean that's what hypnobirthing is kind of all about, is to manage the pain through visualization. And I
it's a
remember visualizing a wave.
it's a funny like in labor visualizing.
Hmm.
It's funny that you bring this up because I can remember being in labor with my second child, and some woman across the hallway in a room was just screaming her head off. She
Hmm.
was in labor, and the nurses attending me were stressed on my behalf that I was hearing this woman. Um, and at the time, I kind of took pride in the fact that I didn't yell or make loud noises or whatever as I was going through labor. And now I look back at that and say, already back then, I was so controlled in um, not letting that energy move through me freely, that I felt like I had to sort of dam it up and just, let this much come through or whatever. It's just kind of symptomatic of my journey throughout adulthood, and how I have to sort of now let the screams come out.
Yeah, like dance it out, like put on the angry music, or stomp and
Yeah,
wave your arms and move that energy, right?
yeah.
Like I've
Well,
seen a really good example of people doing that on Instagram stories lately, and I love it.
yeah, and I committed myself that Sunday morning is going to be my belly dance morning. I took classes a few years ago and fell in love with belly dancing, but just once the classes stopped, haven't really pursued it much since. But wow, I've been putting on my gear lately and just dancing with some of my favorite playlists, and using that as a way to get the energy moving through me. So
That
yeah,
is
moving the
beautiful.
body for sure. I
Wow.
know you love dancing.
Oh yeah, I do love dancing. And I know that going into this year, my only resolution was to be, like, to show up, being more visible, but being with the messy emotions, the messy hair, the messy house, like not letting that stop me from sharing, and not letting like how I look or anything stop me from sharing. And like it's so much easier said than done. It's people would think that that's an easy resolution, but I'm finding it more challenging than a diet resolution. So,
I believe that because actually the very thought of that terrifies me. Just
mhm.
hearing you talk about that, and I'm like, you go, girl. But I don't know if that would be me.
Yeah. I made a list. Well, I went through all of my Facebook friends and I made a list of the people who have impacted my life in a positive way, and then kind of wrote just one line in my journal of how they impacted my life in a positive way. And then just looking at all the similarities of their qualities, like the brave people, the people who speak their truth no matter what, the people who are just like, even just posting selfies of them happy in their own skin, like,
Mm,
not that they're always happy, but just that they're sharing those moments. I just love authenticity so much. And so I want to be that person too. I want to be the person who gives myself permission, but by doing that gives other people permission to be
yeah,
themselves.
yeah. As you're talking about that, one thing that comes up for me is just the whole dichotomy, I guess, around social media. Um, Because on the one hand, that level of connection and everything is so great. And then on the other hand, to what extent can I actually be authentic on social media, right? If I'm so uber
Especially
conscious,
these days,
yeah,
if you
of
want
what
any
I'm putting
friends.
out, and I'm kind of in a love hate, push pull relationship with social media, trying very hard to stay away from news and especially
Mm,
political news these days, because I think that's very anxiety producing, whether it's COVID, whether it's what's going on in the US, which kind of filters back here to where we are at in Canada. Whether it's my own profession, education, there's a big government reform uh, report coming out in the spring. So we have all these big changes, big things happening, these moving pieces that we have absolutely no control over.
mhm,
And how do we just release control and flow with everything?
mhm.
I think
Because
part of
that
it is,
really is the solution to anxiety, is that surrender, that trust, that letting it be, not letting it go, but letting it be instead of like, I don't know, holding on, making a plan, like thinking that we have some sort of control when really that was an illusion. Our security was always an illusion.
yeah, I keep coming back. The scene keeps replaying in my head from Star Wars and Luke Skywalker being taught by Yoda the Jedi training and how he has to learn how to let go. And it's such a process for him. And it's so relatable for me to have to let go of your thinking mind, your need for control, and just let the force move through you.
Mm,
And I think we're terrible at that as North Americans. We have no idea. Everything is about control. And we have all these systems around us that are evaluative. And, you can't go through a day without feeling like you're being evaluated in some way. You're having to measure up, you're having to look at data, interpret data. I think uh, it is anxiety producing. It's very hard to just relax, be loose, and go with the flow, because
mhm.
these systems aren't really about flow, they're about control.
Right. I mean, I was seeing educational system pictures flow through my mind as you were talking, but it's really in all the systems, not just education. But I mean, that's where most people got their beginnings, right? Like that's where most people learned that they, I don't know, learned these things that not so helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the love hate, because good things have come out of these systems. Many great things have been accomplished. But as people, I think we all sort of have the sense that they've taken us to a certain place and now we need to kind of move forward in a different way. They've
Mhm.
kind of reached the end of their usefulness. And if we want to live on a healthy planet, and if we want to have healthy connections with each other, we have to learn to think in different ways.
Yeah, you need to learn how to learn. You need
Yeah.
to um
Yeah.
not be so stuck in rigid thinking. You got to think outside the box to survive. You got to have survival skills, not just have a
Yeah.
bunch of head knowledge. Like
Yeah.
you
You
got to,
sent me a little clip yesterday from Amanda Flaker.
oh, love her.
And one of the things she talked about was just sort of being on the verge of a new renaissance. And that excited me so much because I feel like that's where we're heading. There might be a whole lot of chaos on the way to get there. But I think maybe one of the keys is play, like just learning how to play again.
Mm,
Get out the Lego and build something. Get out the drawing materials. Get out, go sit down at the piano. Go outside and make a snowman or something. Like we
that's
just,
where creative or creativity is found in play, and like that's where the flow state is found. That's where that's the really meditative state.
yeah, yeah. I think we have forgotten how to play as adults at Western, well, maybe all over the world. But people who are so rigid in their belief systems about politics and about religion, there's no give, there's no play, there's no softness, there's no pliability, no flexibility.
No
Um,
seeking to understand,
yeah,
because everyone has a reason for what they believe, and everyone deep down wants the same thing. So you know, there is commonality if you look for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Something else I just discovered recently, magnesium deficiency apparently
Mm.
affects 75, 80% or more of us. And that also plays into depression and anxiety and a whole host of physical symptoms. And so, on a physical level, learning how to regulate our systems and, we have all these deficiencies now in our diet because of so much processed food. And even when we think we're eating good food, it's often being grown in soil that is depleted, that has nutrient depletion. So we're kind of dealing with on multi levels
Hmm.
with all these different layers of things that are making us anxious.
Mm. Yeah, I look forward to the future. I really do. Like maybe not to Wednesday, the 20th of January, but I'm
Just have to get through Wednesday.
right, and then we'll be okay. No. Um,
If the world survives Wednesday, then we can move on.
no, I'm sure there's a lot of chaos to come, but like it's like all great change is preceded by chaos. And I mean, just look through like when back a couple years ago when life was normal. Um, I'm sure other people too, but I would go through these cycles of having so much clarity and then just feeling confusion, like just being stuck in this chaos in my mind. And then after each one of those chaotic times was this like was almost like a beautiful rainbow of clarity that just came from it, like it's I feel like it's just it's something about life, like it's a cycle of life and it's just playing out on a bigger scale now.
Yeah. And the rainbow of clarity, have you found any techniques or any ways of getting to the rainbow, or does it just spontaneously happen? Or what are the conditions
It's
that
like
you create?
orgasm. It's like orgasm. You got to surrender and trust and let go, let be, instead of trying so hard to get to where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going back to the birth metaphor that you brought about before, right? And you said all new things come about through chaos, and you think about the chaos and the messiness of birth.
Hmm.
And there are moments where you think, I just can't push through this. I can't, like, it's, and then there's that final push. And then all of a sudden, everything just moves.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
that's totally it. And I'm sure there's way more metaphors if we really, sat down and tried to come up with them. But like that's just the way life is. There's unknowns and there's
mhm,
chaos and then there's beauty. So much beauty when we look for it.
mhm. Yeah. And I think if we have the understanding that all of us are under intolerable pressure,
Mm,
even if I think about what happened last week with the riots at the Capitol building, that those people are all under incredible pressure and maybe cracking in some ways. And
mm,
who's to say that I wouldn't be the one cracking tomorrow and doing something, not that it's excusable, because I think we are all responsible for our decisions, and we bear the responsibility for putting ourselves in situations where a torch can be ignited. And you know we have to be adults, and we have to, and at the same time I also recognize that we live in a society where the bar has just been raised and raised and raised and raised and raised. And the financial pressures and the pressures of people who are out of work because of COVID, and the pressures to have what other people have and to have some kind of social standing and to achieve. And at what point is it just all too much?
reminds me of what we were talking about a bit before we started recording, about well, just feeling like you had to be in some other place when doing one thing. So like doing dishes, but feeling like you should be spending time with the kids, or running errands, but feeling like you should be working on your business or your work projects. Or, I mean, I could go on and on, but just that not allowing yourself to actually be where you are, enjoying your meal, just busily, doing something on your phone while you're eating. Like, when do we
Yeah.
actually just allow ourselves to just be, to just live? And according to the the great scholars of meditation and everything, they say that's where life is when you can just be. And when you look back at your most favorite moments in life, like whether you were on a water slide or, you're looking at the sunset, like the greatest moments of your life are when you did allow yourself to just be in that moment for
Yeah.
however short period of time.
Yeah. I think that's why I love travel so much, is
Mm,
because I'm away from any situation where I have an agenda, and I
mm,
don't feel responsible for having this accomplished by this time and having this prepared and being evaluated on this. And I
mhm,
can just let go of everything and enjoy. And I
mhm.
think outside of travel, almost every moment of my life, I've said to my husband, I feel like I'm under constant surveillance
Yep.
from myself.
Mhm,
So it's like being surveilled 24/7, and you can't get away from the eye, if you want to think like in Lord of the Rings terms. The great eye is watching at all times.
mm,
And my meditation practice kind of allows me to slip away from under that a little bit.
mhm. Well, we were also talking about parts therapy recently, and you mentioned the inner drill sergeant. So that's kind of the same
Mm,
thing, right? The inner
mm-hmm.
drill sergeant.
Yeah,
Really, our minds can be heaven on earth or hell on earth. And
yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
one of the things that Amanda Flacker was saying yesterday in that video too is that if we look at everything outside us as a mirror of what's inside us,
Hmm.
boy, do we have a mess to clean up if, you know, we start looking at what's on the news and stuff. And we can't just keep pushing it under the carpet and saying that's them. That's those
Hmm.
crazies out there. Because
Yeah.
the fact is, it may be those crazies out there, but it's affecting me because it makes me anxious.
Hmm.
So how am I going to address that? And Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And so if I want peace, I have to be peace, and I have to find peace, and I have to actually admit to myself that I suffer from anxiety, and start looking at effective ways of actually befriending it maybe.
Mm. That's the solution to everything. I'm a therapist, and that is my number one thing is befriending all parts of yourself. Even those parts that we were taught were wrong or, you know, just all parts of ourselves.
Mhm,
The things we judge in other people are the things we judge in ourselves.
mhm. I have been listening a lot lately to a channel called Vital Mind Psychology.
Hmm.
This man is a psychiatrist in or psychologist in Sydney, Australia. Wonderful, amazing stuff. But one of the things that he says about empaths, and I think many of us who are find ourselves consciously on this journey of growth and awareness are empaths. And you talk about parts therapy, and he sort of talks about four parts of the psyche of the empath. Two of them are overdeveloped, and two of them are underdeveloped. So the inner child is overdeveloped, and the inner critic is overdeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
And but the parent, the caring parent, is underdeveloped, and the
Mm-hmm.
warrior is undeveloped. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the frightened, insecure child, and then you have the nasty, vicious critic. And those two energies play against each other all the time, but you don't have the wise, calming parent coming in, soothing, understanding, creating safety, creating sacred space for the child to feel free. And you don't have the warrior getting out there and saying, let's set the boundaries. And, you know, so
Yeah.
it's very, um, with the assault of news and just the nastiness that you can see on social media, it's very damaging to the child, to that, you know, that innocent child, the sacred child.
Mm.
So I think as we start to understand ourselves better, and thinking in parts therapy is really helpful,
Yes.
because it kind of releases you from the judgment of, oh, I should be doing this, I should be better at this, I should
Or
have this
I'm a
under
bad
control.
person because this and this. Rather
Yeah,
than, oh, that's just a part. What does it need? Kind of
yeah,
a thing.
yeah.
Hypnotherapy helps me so much to tame my inner critic or quiet my inner critic. Before hypnotherapy, my mind was yelling at me all the time. After hypnotherapy, I did have that parent voice, but it was not a parent that I had. It was a parent saying, like, "Slow down, like, what do you need right now? It's okay." A lot of times it just says, "Baby girl, it's okay." Like, that's my inner voice. What a nice
Mm,
inner voice to have, right? But I
yeah,
put it there. I put it there because I wanted
yeah,
it there.
yeah. Long ago, when I first went to a counselor for anxiety, which at the time I didn't know was anxiety. Again, I thought it was situational because I was in a very difficult teaching assignment. So I just kind of thought it was all about that.
Mhm.
But one of the exercises that my counselor had me do was to journal in different colors of ink, so that each color was one of
Mm,
those different parts, those different voices were dialoguing with each other.
love
So that
that.
was really helpful and useful.
Wow. Yeah, every time I've gone to therapy, it's been situational too, and almost all my clients situational.
Yeah.
Like because the issues, the real true root issues are subconscious. All we can see is the surface stuff that's conscious.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's only the trigger of
Mhm.
your difficult teaching assignment or COVID or this political situation. It's only the trigger that brings it to the surface, but it was there all
Mhm.
along.
Mhm.
And it will
Well,
still be there when that situation is dealt with.
meditation is just the answer for everything I find because when you zoom out enough, like you just see like why are we here? We're here to grow. How do we
Yeah.
grow? Well, we're triggered by stuff, and then that shows us, what we need to focus
Yeah.
our awareness on. And the dark and the light, the yin yang, the masculine, feminine, that's been fascinating to me recently. Like just and parts therapy too, where you go in, you embrace the bad parts and love them, understand them, see what they need, give them what they need. Like that is the answer rather than fighting, like so much
Hmm.
fighting
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
at war with ourselves.
Yeah. I think meditation, you said meditation is the key to everything. And I think that there are many ways to meditate. When I think of meditation, for me, the key idea is anything that takes you out of your mind, your small ego-based mind, and connects you with something larger,
Mm,
something larger that can be the parent that says, baby girl, it's okay. You are so
mm-hmm,
loved.
mm-hmm,
And whether that is actually sitting on a meditation cushion and doing your 20, 25 minutes of meditation, or whether it's getting out and walking and connecting with nature, or whether it's running and getting into the zone, or doing something creative
like
like cross stitch or drawing.
mindfulness, like just
Yeah.
being there now. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that allows you to be present enough that you can escape the endless chatter.
Mm-hmm. I've really found that yoga with Adriene this January, like she does a new video each day and it's all about the breath. And oh my gosh, like she has some stuff I'd never heard of. It's excellent to be kind of led through something like that, to
Yeah.
try different things with the breath. It's all about the breath.
Ah,
Yeah,
wow.
highly
And
recommend.
something that I have been doing recently that has been so calming for me is I found a canal tour video of Venice
Hmm.
and just being on the water. And because it was filmed this past year, where, the city is practically empty of tourists because of COVID, it's so quiet and so calming. You can hear the boat moving on the water and you can hear the odd, ambient sounds around, but just flowing along through these canals and taking the little alleyways and so on. It's a 3 hours and I've been watching it like
Nice.
just evening after evening, sitting and it's been
That's
so
a
calming.
meditation. Have you
Yeah,
posted it? I would love to watch that.
I'll send you the link.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the great thing, I think, is there's no one way. Um, there's no one way to inner peace. There's no one way to healing and enlightenment, and everybody's going to find their path. But I think it's just about being aware of what's going on. Like
Mhm.
Raphael Kushner says, what's going on right now, and can I be with it
Mm.
without judging it, without questioning it, without trying to analyze it or figuring it out? Can I just name it and be with it?
Mhm. Yeah, so much of our lives has been spent running from those things, running from whatever comes up. but what if,
Hmm.
what if it was just as simple as to sit with it, and then it would go.
That's
It
so
wouldn't stay
gentle.
forever.
Yeah, like we have had, even in the healthcare arena, we've had such a dominance mentality. I'm going to conquer this, right? I'm going to overcome my anxiety. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to beat it. Even when I was going through my cancer journey, I was made aware of that kind of adversarial, confrontative, dominator language around dealing with an illness. And I
Hmm.
really consciously made a choice that no, this is going to be about growth. And, I did a lot of visualization around just the idea of growing an inner garden,
Mm.
and that the chemo was the healing nutrients that were watering my garden, even though I know how toxic chemo drugs are.
Mhm.
And the radiation was the sun shining on my garden.
Mm.
Um, so I think that really helped me avoid a lot of the side effects and just reframe it for myself in a different way. And I think we can do that with anxiety too, is maybe it's not the enemy. If you talk about
Mm.
feeding your demons, maybe anxiety is just that the monster that when you really look at it and find out what it needs and what it wants and start feeding that, it morphs into something that becomes an ally.
Something helpful. Yeah. Because when you look at anxiety, it's fear. What's fear's job? To keep you safe. So if you ask what it wants, what it needs, like it just wants to feel safe, right? It wants
Hmm.
some sort of peace, and we can give it that. Hmm. Yeah, it's awesome because, yeah, in the past I've looked at anxiety sort of with my mind, right? Like Byron Katie, her thing is like it's believing a thought that isn't true. So if you could just not believe that thought, like even asking those questions, like I'm trying to remember the questions she had around it, but it's just like, what would it be like if it wasn't true? Like, are you 100% sure
Yeah,
that it is true?
yeah.
Like,
Well, I love that shift from anxiety, which is a focus on what's wrong with me, what's wrong with my situation, into what's possible.
hmm,
That's a complete mind shift.
mm-hmm,
So, but I'm so mind focused. I went to my doctor last week and I asked for a prescription for sertraline, saying I don't know that I want to fill it because I really would like to address this on some level. And maybe there comes a point where just in order to function and get myself through things, I need some regulation. But um, and they were suggesting CBT, and with my cancer counselor, I've done a bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, but I find I'm so mind centered that I'm really wary of taking that route and going even more into my mind or dealing with my mind, because at this point I feel like I need to work with being present with what's in my body and just being open, being embracing what comes up and not fighting it, not trying to counter my thoughts, not trying to deal with them, not trying to.
well, CBT is like that triangle of thoughts and emotions and the body. Like, so you're saying that you'd like to focus on the body point of the triangle. And
Yeah.
because whenever you do anything on any of those 3 points, you'll shift the others.
Hmm.
So you're saying that, I've focused so much on the one, now I'm going to give the other one a
Yeah.
chance and find some more balance.
Give the mind a little bit of a rest. Yeah.
Hmm.
But the thing is, we all have to find our way, right? There's no one way for anybody. I think
Mm.
everybody finds their own path. And
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's energy in motion, and everybody's got like that's how I see parts therapy too. It's all these people just with these different energies in them, and the energies can be beliefs, the energies can be emotions, and all of those things can be shifted. The people think, oh, this is who I am, like I am a shy person or whatever. But when you see all the people who, were able to see an energy they liked in someone else and kind of like, you know what, I want to adapt that and do that too. So they pretend, they act as if they were that person. And pretty soon they've learned how to do that, and that energy becomes a part of them, and they can do things like public speak when they never thought they could, just or other things. But that's just like my personal example. um I don't know why I've got off on that rabbit trail, but just it's the idea of possibilities. It's the idea of energies, and being able to shift those energies, especially with the parts therapy. It's amazing to see people come in all upset, all anxious, and then once they have like given it what it wants, what it needs, how it will feel, fed it the nectar, their whole demeanor changes. Like
Mm-hmm.
that energy is definitely shifted, and they have like an anchor, a resource, an ally, a helpful, thing to hold on to remember that they can bring with them. And yeah, it's just so transformative. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's the power of sacred listening, I think. And
Mm,
if you think about parts therapy or feeding your demons or any of that, as sacred listening, in the same way that you would sit down with somebody who has an oppositional viewpoint, whether it's politics or religion, and instead of arguing and resisting, which is what we do with anxiety, or what I've done with anxiety so much, trying to reason it away, trying to figure it out, if you just create that space and let that other person talk,
mm,
and just, what is your biggest fear? What is it that you feel like you need? How will you feel when you get what you need? um, People just
mhm,
relax. You can see the body language shift when
mm,
somebody is feeling heard
mhm,
and listened to. And I think that's all about the need for validation as a self. If
mhm,
somebody is willing to give me space and listen to me, then I matter on
mhm,
some level. And I think we're so afraid that we don't matter. That little inner child is just so hungry for significance.
mhm. I've been reading the parts therapy books. There's three books to IFS parts therapy, and it's reading to my daughter, and she loves the stories in there. And yeah, they're just they're just so fascinating how the different parts want to be heard so badly and have just never been listened to.
Hmm.
And it's just the relief, and like their whole body feels relief to be heard, like just to have a chance to speak, to have a chance to tell its story of why it's there.
Yeah. I feel like COVID has given us a golden opportunity to do that work, that kind of inner work, because we are having to stay home. Our social lives have been diminished. Um, and I'm a little bit afraid that that opportunity is kind of all going into Netflix and social media, and which often make us feel even worse and play into the fears and the anxieties that we have.
Mm,
But if we could use this golden opportunity to just get quiet a little bit and listen to those inner voices, those different parts,
mhm,
what do you want? What do you need? And just open ourselves. Boy, do we
yeah,
ever have a golden opportunity to do some shifting.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, just some self-compassion would go a long way in self-talk. Like
Hmm.
if someone wants to clean up their self-talk, or, quiet the inner critic and turn up the volume on the inner coach,
Yeah.
some compassion is really the ingredient that you need.
And you use the word stories, like your daughter loves the stories.
Mm, mhm.
If we
They're
could
so
be as,
relatable.
yeah, but we, every voice, every part in ourself is a story or has a story. And if we were just curious and fascinated in the stories that the different parts of us are telling, and
Mhm.
then listening to those stories and just saying, does that have a ring of truth? Like in my body, does that really feel true? Or
Yeah,
does
like
that
mhm.
story just, does that story put me into anxiety? And Raphael Kushner talks about two basic responses, which is expansion and contractions.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
when I hear a part of myself telling a story, does it expand me and make me feel, like I'm expanding into the world, like I'm becoming more of myself? Does it contract me and make me feel protective
Mm.
and like I need to defend myself?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people live their life through those responses of the body. They're, full body yes, full body no. Just, I don't want to forget to say this, but when I was reading the book to my daughter, I teared up several times when parts of me that had never been heard felt heard just by reading the story. And I just kind of had that realization because it wasn't my mind realizing it necessarily. It was my body just kind of being like, yes,
Mhm.
like that is how you feel, that
Yeah,
is what
yeah.
happened and why,
It's
I don't
so
know, it's awesome.
funny. It makes me think that it's so funny we allow ourselves to be moved by reading those other stories. And I feel like that's all about some part of ourselves, like you say, being validated.
Hmm.
And it makes me think that we have so many stories within ourselves that haven't been validated. When we watch a movie, when we read a book, and we tear up, it's almost like a part of me saying, "Me too, me too."
Yes, exactly. In movies and everything, like anytime there's story, or even if someone is like telling you their story and you feel for them, that's a part of you that can relate, right?
Yeah,
Or even if you're triggered by something someone else says or does, it's also uh, a feeling heard, or it's I guess in a different way.
yeah, yeah. It
And
strikes
so
me that's almost a good practice to develop is anytime you feel yourself being triggered by somebody else, there's a part of you saying, "Me too." So then
mm,
it's almost worth taking a moment to say, "Me too. Tell me your story," or what in your story is connecting with this story.
mhm, mhm. So would that be the anxiety experiment, or to boil it all down, what would the anxiety experiment look like for you? Just going forward
Ooh,
to play
I
with that idea.
yeah, I think maybe I want to try that for a couple of weeks, just see where the Me Too arises.
Mhm,
Um, we had a couple of years ago the Me Too movement going,
mhm.
and that was all about all of these women and sometimes men and young men um, who had been harmed, who had been assaulted, who had been um,
Violated somehow.
yeah, preyed upon and silenced, had
Mm,
not been able to tell their stories. And those stories had been bottled up for so long and hadn't been validated. And even on an inner level, when you can't tell your story, at some level, you're telling yourself, my story's not true. It's not true enough to be told, or no one will believe it. And so
mm,
just the outpouring that came from a few people being brave enough to step out and tell a story. And all of a sudden, there's this Me Too response reverberating everywhere. And
mhm,
people took the opportunity to tell their stories and came out, and the energy was just so strong around that.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah, maybe that'll be my buzzword for the next 2 weeks is just noticing anytime some kind of a reaction that comes up and what part of me is saying me too.
Mm, love it.
What
Yeah,
about you?
I think I'm gonna do the same thing. But just that checking in, like noticing when I start to feel not okay instead of waiting till I like my headache is so horrible I can't do anything else but sleep, right? Or try to sleep. Yeah, it's crazy how we've been conditioned to not listen to our bodies when they're saying take a break, or postpone your appointment, or whatever it may be, or even change jobs, which is really hard for some people.
Hmm.
And I know it's an impossible decision financially. Um, but like some people just get to the end of their rope
Yeah, we've been
Like,
enslaved a little bit by our, well, a little bit to a large extent. We've been enslaved by a mind-dominated culture, which begins early with schooling and um, being able to get out of the mind and more into the heart and body is going to be a journey for all of us.
hmm, yeah. And I guess another thing for me would be to notice when I am triggered. And a lot of times when I'm triggered, I just go to my phone because my phone will distract me, and I'll get that temporary relief, right? But to sit with it instead, and to have like more moments of quiet, more moments of like going for a walk without my phone, kind of a thing. Like doing that on purpose, taking those breaks, because I always feel better after I do that. It's just, and I always
Mhm.
feel better after like being on the yoga mat with Yoga with Adrian. But oh, she always says getting to the mat is the hardest part. After that, it's easy.
Yeah, yeah,
So deciding to go on that walk, or like going on that walk, is the hardest part. Being on the walk is fun. You know, how you feel after the walk is great, but just doing those things. So yeah, I think just looking at life with as an experiment, more playful, more just like nothing is in our control and that's okay kind of an attitude. That it's easier said than done, because I definitely had to face that when my brother and sister died. Um, because then I was faced with, well, what if the other people in my life who I love die too? So I had to get to that point in my grief story, in the grief cycle, where it was okay if I died and if the people I love died. And that brought such a peace, such a
mm,
surrender, such a trust. Like when you zoom out enough to be like, in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be okay. Like we're so caught up in our stories, in our relationships and everything, that that's where anxiety can creep back in, and it definitely has, because I'm a mom, and moms can get quite anxious about their kids'
yeah,
safety and health and everything. And it's normal. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that the more we can get to that point of zooming out in meditation and just releasing
hmm.
and surrendering, the more
Isn't it
peaceful life will be.
funny? It's just so strange how it's so much easier to go into catastrophic thinking
Hmm.
than into, I don't know what the opposite would be. Like, what is the best thing that could happen? How often do we go into that mode of thinking, right? We're trying to make a decision, and usually we're like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen?
And then it's
And our
usually
mind
not
has
so bad.
already our mind has already been there, identifying 10 possible things that could go wrong, whereas the mind doesn't necessarily go to 10 possible things that could be amazing and awesome and wonderful about taking this decision.
Like Kyle C says, the mind can't see
Yeah.
what it'll gain, it can
Yeah.
only see what it'll lose.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, we've gotten to the end of our
What
time that we
how
usually
long have
spend
we been
on
going
screen
here?
together. Oh, it's yeah, almost the end of the hour. So, is there any last thoughts on the anxiety experiment that you'd like to share?
Uh, I would love to hear comments from people who you know, find their own ways to do an experiment with anxiety, whether it's just
Mm,
noticing how it shows up in their
mhm.
life, or whether they try and experiment with loosening up a bit and being a little more in the flow of things, or um, it would be fun to hear from other people about how they're dealing with anxiety, because I'm sure that this is widespread these days.
Indeed, and it's natural, and we are not immune. We're all in this together, and I think it's just good to talk about it. Anyways, until next
Oh,
time.
thanks for sticking with us if you're still here.
Yeah, right? We're just talking to each other right now. All right, keep following your heart song.